All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson McKay.
And today's guest is Matt Fraser. Matt is an American professional CrossFit athlete with the mantra of hard work pays off, HWPO. He's the most decorated and dominant athlete in the history of CrossFit. He's the only CrossFit athlete in history to win 5 consecutive CrossFit Games titles as the fittest man on earth from 2016 to 2020, as well as finish on the podium 7 consecutive times from 2014 to 2020. Prior to finding CrossFit, Fraser was the 2009 Junior National Weightlifting Champion and resident athlete at the Olympic Training Centre. Now, Matt is a phenomenal athlete, we can all agree, but it's his mindset and approach to training and competing that makes him such a CrossFit legend and an ongoing success at whatever he tries. So in this interview, I try to find out how we too can become like Matt Fraser. In this interview, we discuss how Matt uses his engineering qualifications to build systems for his training and competitions, the importance of Matt's mantra, HWPO, and how it has helped him achieve his life goals, how Matt saw the bright side in breaking his back, and his mindset shift can help you see the silver lining in problems too, and so much more. And now, let's get to the interview. But thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute honour to feature you. But for people who maybe don't recognise you, which is very unlikely, how do you give a cliche, 30-second answer of who you are and why you're a legend?
Yeah, I mean, first off, thank you for having me. I think the best description, so for anyone that doesn't know CrossFit or myself, I think it's safe to say I made a name for myself by winning the CrossFit Games 5 times. 7-time podium finisher at the games, and the CrossFit Games are basically the world championships of CrossFit. So you win the title of fittest man on earth. So you're getting tested anything cardio based, weightlifting based. So powerlifting, strongman, Olympic weightlifting. On the cardio side, it could be single modality on any implement that they want to test you on. And then you mix in gymnastics, and then there's the whole variable of the unknown. So the CrossFit Games are usually a 5-day competition, 15 events, give or take a few. Sometimes we know the events, anywhere from a week to 2 weeks ahead of time. And then we've been in the extreme scenarios of finding out the event, 30 seconds before we go. And then in one instance, we even found out the event as we were completing it. So as you're in a race, you don't know where the finish line is, and your referee's kind of giving you information as you go. So, tested anything from a 1 rep max lift, which, is taking, 1 second, 2 seconds long, to we've done 3-hour events like a marathon row on the Concept 2 rower. So 42,000 meters, and and then anything in between. It's quite the test.
Because that's why I was so keen to have you on, because to do something like I watched it at the Arnold's and it was phenomenal. It was tiring watching it. Never mind actually sitting and competing in it. But to say that you've won it 5 times in a row is a phenomenal achievement. But I know if I did your workout and I ate like you, I wouldn't get anywhere. I'd be just a fat, sweaty mess. I'm really interested in your hard work pays off, that mentality that seems to drive you as a person. Do you think initially your parents were figure skaters in the Olympics? Do you think you're always destined to be this, or was there another path for young Matt back in the day?
No, I mean, my parents, so My parents were pairs freestyle figure skaters. They started skating together when they were 18, 19 years old, and they competed in the 76 Olympics. Then they won a couple world championship titles once they turned pro. Um, so, obviously, there's the potential for an athletic background. Um, but growing up, my brother and I never saw them skate. They never pushed athletics on us, anything like
Mm.
that. Basically, the only rule was we had to do something, some structured activity after school. Didn't have to be sports, music, art, whatever we wanted. So, my brother went the musical route. Always in a band, always in theater club, and he got the exact same support that I got when I started pursuing Olympic weightlifting. Any
Mm.
competition, usually my brother was there with my parents, and the same when my brother had a theater production, I was sitting in the crowd with my parents, and um, they wanted to instill like a good work ethic into us, and then if we signed up for a soccer season or signed up for a theater production, even if 2 weeks in we're like, dude, I hate this. It's like, all right, well, you signed up, other people are relying on you, like you're part of a
Mm.
team, you need to fulfill your commitment. um, and I don't through middle school and high school I did Olympic style weightlifting, really couldn't be much more different than figure skating. And I think
That's
my
it.
parents were just happy that my brother and I were applying our potential towards something. They didn't care that it was what they were experts in.
Because I mean, when you started weightlifting, I think you had the injury, but before that, you were giving it balls to the wall. You were obsessive about it. You were living in the Olympic Center. You know, when you had that initial injury, how did you you broke the was it L5 and L4 in your back? How
I
on
broke my L5
was it
L5 in two
L5?
spots. Yeah.
How did you at that point start thinking, okay, I can come back from this? Because you came back even stronger, bumped into a CrossFit gym to use the facilities, and decided, well, I'll give this a shot, and became 5 times fittest man on earth. It's
Yeah.
not
So
the usual
yeah,
path to this.
yeah. Yeah, the progression of finding CrossFit, so when I was 19, I think I was 19, I broke my L5 in two spots. I was living full time at the Olympic Training Center. Um, and, it was a devastating blow because you know, you're in a place of uncertainty. You don't know, um, not even how am I going to come back from this, but can I come back from this?
Hmm.
And it I was living out there by myself and living on your own at that age. It was really tough. Like I was in a low spot. Thankfully, the surgeon that I got linked up with, the surgery I had was basically experimental. Um, the first option, what all the other surgeons told me was the only option was fusion, and they were telling me like you're never going to play a sport again. You're never going to compete at a high level. Like the most you'll do for physical fitness is a light jog. And so that just, especially as a young kid, that just takes the wind right out of your sails.
Hmm.
But then the surgeon that I got linked up with, he was very confident and basically said, like, oh no, like if this surgery takes, you'll be back, you'll be good as new. You'll be stronger than you were before. And so that was kind of, what gave me hope. But at the same time, even after the surgery, then I'm probably 6 to 8 months of wondering, did the surgery work? So it's just I can deal with pain, I can deal with adversity, I can deal with discomfort. That's all very simple. It's but having the uncertainty of not knowing, is this the right move? Is this the wrong move? Did it not take? Is my sports career over? Do I have more potential? That's what would just that's what eats me alive, is the uncertainty. And at that age, you don't have many life experiences in that tough of a situation. So it was literally just I didn't have another option. I just had to stay pointed in that direction. Otherwise, the only other option was just give up. And I didn't know if I was going in the right direction, but I wasn't sitting still. I wasn't accepting defeat. So I just kind of kept chugging.
No, I mean because it's certainly a dark place for a lot of people, but you used it as a kind of a learning experience and a way of building tools to kind of learn how to do things. Like you kind of realized if things were going to change. Do you think that helped later on in your career when you were only getting told how to do an exercise as you were in the middle of it, or as the new business was taking off, things were getting thrown at you and mixing it up? Has it helped you as a person, do you think?
It's 100% helped me become, who I am and how I conduct myself now. I didn't know it at the time, but once I, dealt with the injury, got the surgery, had the recovery process after that, um, you know, basically every time I'm faced with an obstacle, especially when I was still competing in CrossFit, I would get, injuries are inevitable. If you're pushing yourself to limits, little tweaks are going to happen, things like that. Um, but it definitely gave me the confidence moving forward because if I'm dealing with knee pain or like a tweaked shoulder, something
Mm.
simple, I'm always looking back of like, dude, if I got through that shit when I was 19, this is nothing. This is
Yeah.
easy. And especially being in the sport of CrossFit where I was coming from Olympic weightlifting where, you know, you're either taking the bar from the ground to overhead in one movement, which is the snatch, or you're taking the bar from the ground to overhead in two movements while stopping at your shoulders. You're using most of the same muscle groups. It's all the same technique. It's incredibly repetitive. Whereas CrossFit, if my ankle was stiff, there's 1,000 other things I can work on. So an injury or just little aches and pains never stop me in my tracks. And so having the combination of those two things of like now I have unlimited variability in what I can train, and the fact that I went through this previous life experience, and I'm like, dude, if that shit didn't derail me, nothing will.
Mm.
It's and then the confidence side of it as well of looking at how low I was and how hopeless I was when I had my back injury, of the situation of not even knowing, you know, how am I going to recover, but can I recover from this? Now applying that forward of like, dude, I was that low not that many years ago, and I'm psyched with where I am now. So any obstacle or problem that comes up now, I'm like, oh man, I wonder what the silver lining of this is going to be in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So, even in moments where, in my CrossFit career where I was dealing with something that put me at a low point, obviously upset, obviously, struggling to figure out what is the best path to recover from this, but having that confidence behind me of knowing it will be okay.
Mm.
I don't know if it's going to be okay in a week, a month, a year. I don't know how it's going to be okay, but if I give this enough time and I keep working towards it, like the silver lining will show itself. And of course it did through my competitive CrossFit career time and time again.
It's an awesome way to look at it because I mean, a lot of times people just crumble at the first sign of adversity.
Mhm.
We're not really challenged in today's life. I always say you can order a date online, you can order food online, you can order a taxi. It's you don't really get pushed anymore. And
I,
I
I mean,
think,
problems are relative. I talk about this all the time. Of, if I'm in peak training, I have nothing else going on in my life. Like I concern myself with training and prepping for training and competing, and that's
Mhm.
it. In that moment, if I get a hangnail, like I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. Um, but I always need to step back and look at it like I have a roof over my head. I have a full belly. I have people around me that love me. I'm like all these other things. And it's like, oh, my problems are relative because this is what I'm focused on. And I have
Mhm.
something going on that's stopping me from it. Um, so, depending on times in the season, um, different things come up that kind of put things in perspective. I can be bitching and moaning about like, oh, my ankle's stiff. I have a hangnail. Whatever it is, training's not going my way. And then you have a real life problem come up of a loved one is dealing with health issues, and it's like, oh my God, none of this other shit matters. Like this is
Mhm.
this is what I need to focus on.
I mean, do you think you studied engineering at your university while you were doing CrossFit, as you do. You always seem to need another extra challenge. Do you think that kind of engineering approach helped you? That when you went to do, like suddenly you realize you had no gas tank when you were lifting and doing CrossFit.
Mhm.
I did that when I went to jiu-jitsu. I was like, hey, wait a minute here. What do you mean I need to run as well? I need to last more than 5 minutes, because I used to deadlift and power lift, and suddenly you've got to move as well. Do you
Yeah.
think that engineering approach helped you, that you were looking at your body and thinking, how can I make the system more efficient? How can I make this process work better for me?
100%, and in multiple different aspects. So basically, mechanical engineering degree is just you have a certificate that's proving to your future employer that you are a really, really good problem solver.
Mm.
Early on engineering, you're assuming everything is an ideal situation. So you're you're ignoring energy loss to heat, you're ignoring energy loss to friction, you're like all these different things. And then once you start getting, and then you see like a problem, the answer given that everything is running in an ideal world where you're not, friction isn't a thing, heat loss isn't anything like that. And then once you get more and more advanced and you start factoring in those things and you see the discrepancy between the two,
Mm.
it is drastic. And so basically it's what it's teaching you is you know how many different variables apply to the end result. And and I had experience with it where my training was awesome, but then my sleep was shit, my diet was terrible, my home life
Mm.
wasn't sound, all these different things. And you see the effect that they have. And so basically taking it like an engineering problem, then this problem of becoming the best at CrossFit and seeing how all these different variables play in. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also looking at your body very objectively. Like your body is just a bunch of levers. And so learning, how to move this bar or this ball or this yoke as efficiently as possible, looking at your body as a machine of how can I run at 100% efficiency and looking at each lever arm individually. Um, and then there's just the math computing side of things. When you're running intervals on the track or doing intervals on the rower, and you're a quarter of the way through, and you're like, okay, I'm 2 seconds ahead of pace now. If I'm diminishing on my output as I progress through the next 8 minutes, how much can I afford to drop off? Or if you're behind on a track interval, it's like, hey, all right, I'm 3 seconds behind, then I have three more 400s. How much time do I need to make up for each one? Um, being able to compute and do all those calculations on the fly to see, it came up a lot for me. Most of my CrossFit career, I was in the final heat. So there's usually 4 heats of individual male competitors. And, if somebody in the first heat got the top time, well, I know I'm going into my heat knowing the time I need to beat. And I'm able to do, uh, check up on my pacing mid workout. So, if I'm after 2 rounds of a 7-round workout and I'm like, okay, I'm at this time and I need to beat this time, how much time can I afford per round after this? And so, it definitely played a huge, huge role into how I competed and how I trained.
Because I was really impressed. I've listened to like a heap of different interviews you've done, and I really like the ones where you've talked about you were making a system of building towards, is this practice going to help me in my overall performance? It wasn't, you were, how do I get better sleep to improve my performance? How do I eat better to improve my performance? I love how you create a lifestyle to compete. You now create a lifestyle to build the business, to you seem to have this obsessive nature like I have. That's why I never started smoking, to avoid, I would want to be
Yeah.
rolling 50 a day and playing with all the
Yeah.
different things. You seem to be like that. You seem to throw yourself into that. How do you build up your lifestyle, your habits, your systems to make sure that the mat that goes in to compete is the best efficient mat, the most processed mat that can get this done? Did you think
Um,
about this, or did it come flow?
so little bit of both. One, the early stages of it aren't really much of a choice for me. It's something I know about myself. I've known since I was, 12 years old, is that I have an incredibly addictive personality. Um,
Hmm.
if I pick something up and I like it, it's going to be
You're away.
consuming. And, so when I came in, it first started when I started going to University of Vermont of, I knew I wanted to be good at it. And, I had some previous life experience with how to train for weightlifting and, taking the mistakes that I had from my weightlifting days and applying it forward of like, how do I improve on this? Um, and then there's the other kick in the ass after the 2015 games. I was incredibly, incredibly disappointed with the results. And so applying that addictive personality to my CrossFit career started after the 2015 games. And I realized that I wasn't disappointed in the results. I was disappointed in my effort to get those results. And I knew those results reflected the effort. So I got second place for a second time and just went like, oh, that's my fault. I deserve second place. And it was the what if, I was looking at like, what was the deciding factor? What was the one thing that if I had changed that one thing would have led me to a win or a loss? Because, it was a very, very tight race into the last event. Basically, whoever won the last event won the whole competition. And, for me, it was like, all right, what if my sleep was better? What if my diet was a little bit cleaner? What if my training was a little more consistent? And I didn't know which variable contributed. And so I just said, fuck it. I'm not going to leave anything up to what if. I'm going to try to be as perfect as possible. I'm going to strive for perfection going into this. And so, for that whole season, it was probably 10 months worth of a commitment. And I just made a deal with myself of, for the next 10 months, for this one season, I'm not going to have a single what if at the end of the season. Whatever the results are, I know that is my top performance capabilities. And so, I gave myself a bedtime. I gave myself a meal plan. I trained consistently. All these little things that I don't know which one was the contributing factor. I don't know which one was the fork in the road of, hey, if you continue this, you're going to get second place. If you don't, if you make the correction, you're going to win. And in the grand scheme of life, 10 months it's fucking nothing, look back at where you were 10 months ago. Sometimes it feels like it was last weekend. And so, I did that for that whole season. And then I won by the largest margin of victory ever in the sport. And I went, oh, it worked. Awesome. Let me double down on that. Let me find more little tiny things that I can change throughout my season to give myself the performance that I truly felt reflected my abilities.
Because it's a big thing, and everybody assumes there's a magic bullet. There's you eat this, you're fine. I think it was beta alanine you mentioned on the podcast,
beta alanine,
and everybody bought it because they thought that made you. Whereas they weren't looking
absolutely.
at the compound interest, the little changes you were making that were fixing things. So how using your sort of engineering approach, how did you use it like analytically to check it? Were there tools? Were there like journals, techniques that you used?
I think there's a couple things that I took from directly from my schooling of studying my performance, the way I studied for engineering. So one, like the retention rate of like basically remembering your notes from school, your retention rate goes up something like 80% if you review all of your school notes that night. So, you say you have class at 9 a.m., you're scribbling notes the whole class. That night before you go to bed, read through everything. And just from that one simple task, you're not redoing all the work, you're not redoing all the problems, but just going through and getting your eyes on it for a second time, your retention rate is going to skyrocket. And so, I had that while I was training of, I logged everything I did in training, logged my scores, everything. I would go through and that night review all of my training just to get eyes on it again. And then that second night I would add in, all right, what did you do well and what could you have done better? And, one sentence, a couple words, I would look at a Metcon and go, all right, once I finished that workout, I realized I could have held onto the bar for another couple reps before breaking up my set, or I could have done a couple more ring muscle ups, or I should have broken up a little bit sooner. My paces fell off by the end. And by adding in those notes and looking at my day's work at night and adding in those notes, my retention rate, I think, skyrocketed, so that the next time a similar workout comes out or a similar stimulus or implement comes up, I'm now remembering, all right, last time I did this, it was a set of 20 and I broke it up into 12-8, but I think I should have gone unbroken. So let's try to go unbroken this time. The other part was breaking down the entire year into basically daily steps of looking at, okay, when I go to the games this year in August, I want to have, let's say a 300-pound snatch, a 375 clean and jerk. I want a back squat 485. I want to pull, a 138 average 2K, whatever the numbers are that I'm looking for. And then looking at that, okay, that's where I want to be in 10 months. What do I need to do in 9 months to make sure I'm where I'm at in 10, 8, 7, 6, all the way down, and then breaking it down to all the way to a weekly basis, a daily basis. Because if I'm going into the gym every single day, my only goal for the season is to win the CrossFit games, I'm going to be leaving my training session every single day a failure, because I'm going to leave the gym and go, did I win the CrossFit games today? Nope. Boom. Today was a failure. So breaking it down, not only just so I had a daily dose of instant gratification, I can check a box of, okay, I did what I needed to today, so I can be where I want to be in 10 months from now. And it's just a daily dose of gratification of giving yourself these little tiny baby steps, and those little tiny baby steps every single day. Once you compound those over a year and then season and season back to back, they compound drastically.
I love that kind of approach. It's because everybody assumes it's like, oh, you start doing deadlifts, that's going to make you a superstar. You do this, it's going to make you a superstar. It's the little methods you're changing. And this is why I'm so keen to have you on, because it's hard not to sit and take notes. I keep forgetting I'm to ask the next question, because I've listened to so many of your interviews where, I think, what is it? You said in the GQ interview, for example, I've been fortunate enough to overcome some obstacles over the years. So I feel like I have a good perspective when life deals me a card I wasn't expected. I have the tools in place to overcome it and the mental tricks that go along with it. And you've talked in other interviews about the body language you would bring into your competition. So you would probably almost like win the race before it had started, or the methods you used for your training. You seek out, coaches and experts to help you in certain areas. How do you start breaking down like the calisthenics, the plyometrics, the Olympic lifting, all these different things? How do you start working with people to become the best?
So it's basically just a giant game of Tetris. When you're looking at, how many different movements, implements, time domains that we need to train for, you're busy all day. So, it's basically playing a giant game of Tetris. And then after every competition, looking at reviewing your performance. And I went to an extreme of, if I won an event at the games, I basically stopped training that. So if I went into an Olympic weightlifting event and I win the snatch, well, basically I'm going to throttle back drastically on the time and effort that I'm putting into that movement, because you don't get more points for winning by more. So your performance is scored relative to other people. So if I'm say there's an event where it's a 1 mile for time, it's a mile time trial, and I get 5 minutes flat, and the second place was 5:30. Well, I don't get more points. I should have run a 5:29 mile, save some energy, because it doesn't matter how much you win an individual event by, it's the same points. So I took that to a perspective of like, all right, if I'm winning the event at the games, I can throttle back on that. I can sacrifice some time and effort and put that to my lowest scoring event, and then breaking it down of what was my lowest scoring event, why was it lowest score, and being brutally honest. There are instances where you felt like you had a bad judge or something like that, and you're like, no, I know I'm really good at that, but my equipment faulted, or my judge was giving me a hard time, whatever it was. That it's rarely the case, but looking at it very objectively and going, okay, do I need to apply more time there? What about it? Was it the implement itself? Was it the stimulus? Was it the time domain? All these different factors, and looking at what do I need to change moving forward to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Because you've said your biggest sort of fear is not, utilizing your full potential and things, and you always seem to want to, no matter what it is, I'm going to do the best business, I'm going to do the best relationship, the best friendship, the best whatever it is. Do you think that has, because you've tied your personality, your identity into that rather than you're the fittest man on earth, so you don't lose that identity when you finish, that you can use this approach to like, I just need to work on this. Oh, that's a weakness. I'm going to work on that. You're not thinking, oh, I need to be better than him to keep this persona up. Have you?
So I mean, once again, this is kind of something that I took from my previous sports career, was making sure that, like you're a fool to think if you're going to compete forever, if you're going to, remain number one, especially in a physical field, it's going to end at some point. So I had a couple different experiences with it. One, I watched my parents. My parents were Olympians, multiple time world champions after they turned pro. And then, but I know them as mom and dad. I don't know them as Candy Jones and Don Fraser, the figure skaters. And I'm willing to bet if you ask them, like, hey, what's your pride and joy? Like, what are you most proud of in your life? It's probably not their sports career. My mom went on to, be a family physician. They raised 2 kids that I hope they're pretty psyched on. And then, so that was my example. They had this tremendous sports career, but I knew them as mom and dad. And then from my weightlifting, with my back injury, I realized how quickly your sports career can get stripped away from you with no control. Like I unexpectedly broke my back. You don't usually break your back. You don't anticipate it, but, and I saw how quickly, boom, that can get stripped away. And then any athlete knows, you can have the training session of a lifetime and then pull your trap, putting your gym bag over your shoulder. Those injuries, like you can't control them. You get T-boned by a car and boom, sports career is over. And so I always knew, like, from that as well, like seeing how quickly that can get stripped away, I wanted to make sure to have a backup plan. I wanted to make sure to have a personal identity and goals outside of the gym so that when the inevitable day comes that, whether I have a career-ending injury or I'm not good enough to compete anymore, or if I decide to walk away, I'm not walking away to just sitting on the couch and twiddling my thumbs. I don't do well with idle hands. And so I wanted to make sure to have an identity outside, because the day I decide to retire, somebody new is going to be the fittest man in the world. And I, like, when that day happened, I was there. I was, crying in the stands for the guy. I was pumped for him because I was very content. I'm like, no, I went there. I did what I wanted to do. I feel incredibly accomplished and proud of what I did. But I knew when I stepped away, I didn't want to ever have those lingering feelings of like, could I do one more season? I miss it. All this and that. It's like, nope. Like I had some projects lined up for the day I stepped away.
Because that's why I was keen to have you on. It's not what rep scheme did you use? It's what makes you, like how do you, because everybody could do your workout, but no one could be you without that approach to life, that mental kind of conditioning, that cognitive sort of like breakdown and an analytical mind. And I love the way that you look at things and you think, how do I improve this? How do I improve that? I mean, you talked about how you work with coaches so that you got your form so good, you couldn't basically break it down like your weightlifting form when you retired. Mm-hmm. You worked on it so much that it was impossible to go wrong in your form. How do you do this with other things like the gymnastics, with like how can a beginner athlete coming into CrossFit, can you go past the learning curve? Can you hack your way in, or do you need to make the mistakes to learn it, do you think?
I think so. One one thing that, I've said this for years, the most valuable thing I learned in college was how to learn. I figured out what worked for me.
Yeah.
And then, when there's so many parallels moving forward into my sports career, into my business career, of find people that are specialists, find people that know more than you. I've done it in my personal life. I've done it in my sports career. I've done it in my business life. You know, with running a business, especially how it is now, there's so much going on that I don't know how to do it. Like I know what I'm good at. I know I'm phenomenal at training CrossFit. I know I'm phenomenal at coaching, programming, all these things. I don't know how to build an app. I don't know how to, manage, all these employees. So it's like, all right, well, let me find somebody that does, and let me try to learn from them. And it was the same, when it came to running, when it came to deadlifting, like deadlifting is a great example because I'm proficient in Olympic weightlifting. That's what I did for 10 years, snatch, clean and jerk. But when it came to powerlifting, I'm like, I could get 80% of the way there. But in terms of specific deadlift, I don't know. So let me try to get a hold of somebody that, is a world champion, has a world record, something, and pick their brain. Because very, very rarely do you find somebody that is the best in the world at what they do and they don't enjoy talking about it. And so, that's what I did with running. That's what I did with deadlifting. That's what I did with swimming. And yeah, you're going to get told no 100 times, but who gives a shit? Just send out the email, send out the text. It's usually a small world. You just put out your intentions into the world of like, hey, I'm looking for a deadlift specialist. Can anyone help me? And that's basically what I did. I used a network of friends, colleagues to track down professionals. And there's literally the same as what I do for hobbies. I love coffee. What? Just start searching hashtag espresso on Instagram and start sending out DMs. Like if somebody has something that you want, somebody has that knowledge on how to make the perfect shot of espresso. Well, they've put in the time, they've put in the effort. They're professional at it, and they're passionate about it. And very rarely do you find someone that's the best at what they do and they don't want to chit chat about it with you. And so, that's where Instagram is just like the craziest tool of like networking of, yeah, like you might send out 10 DMs to 10 people that all have a trait that you are striving towards, and 9 might not read it, but then all you need is that one to answer back and, start chit chatting, build that relationship and then start asking questions.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
It's what I did with the podcast. I was so interested in certain things,
Yeah.
knew I didn't know, and I was like, I'll ask that expert, and it is phenomenal. And I love that how you're like in your your hard work pays off business. You're bringing in all these experts, you're creating new systems, asking people what they want, and you're building from there. Do you find that? I mean, I think you got it tattooed on yourself, the Serenity Prayer, the control the controllables. I find a lot of top performers just go, okay, that's what I focus on. I'll get other experts in to do this. Do you control the controllables and delegate the others? Is this the engineering mindset coming in as well?
Yeah, I mean, my whole life, I say the Serenity Prayer to myself, 20 times a day. And a lot of times, when you're faced with a tough situation, it's so easy to go, oh, well, if he didn't send that email, if she didn't say that to that person, if this person would just do what I told him to do. Yeah, it's very easy to point the finger at what everyone else is doing wrong, but that doesn't resolve the problem. So you have to look at, all right, I'm clearly in a situation right now that I don't want to be in. What can I do to get myself out of it? And and not looking at like, oh, well, if Sally would just do her fucking job, I wouldn't be in this situation. It's like, all right, well, let's have a talk with Sally. Like, is it that, she's not the right fit for that position? Is she, did you not communicate the task at hand properly to her? Did you not set, the proper guidelines or due date, or like, what can I do to fix this problem? Do I need to educate her? Do I need to put out better expectations? There's a list a mile long. Um, I did it when I was competing. Before every event, I would go to the back of my corral, I would crouch down, I would say the serenity prayer to myself, and then I would analyze it, how it applied to that event.
Mm.
And looking at it, okay, what do I not have control over in this situation? I don't have control over who I have for a judge. I don't have control over how my competitors pace this workout. I don't have control over the equipment that's allotted in my lane, anything like that. And then going through, what do I have control over? 9 times out of 10, the only thing I have control over is my effort. And so really honing in on that, for like, okay, what is a good distinction of me putting in a solid effort? And then just breaking that down, and then so that I'm running my own race. And then regardless of the results, whether I get first place or 40th place, I can be proud and make sure that those results reflect my personal ability. Because once again, in this sport, your results, it doesn't matter if it was the best event for you. You're scored on how the other guys did. You're scored relative to other people. So if I'm going into a competition, there's a mile time trial. My mile PR is 5 minutes. And then I go out there and I run a 450 mile. Well, I'm doing fucking backflips. A 10-second PR, that's phenomenal. I executed perfectly. I did awesome. Well, if 39 other guys that day all decide to run a 430 mile, well, am I now disappointed in my effort and in my results? Fuck no. I executed perfectly. I got a personal record. I could not have done better. And so making sure that I'm executing so that I'm proud of my results at the end of the day. And, the hope is that if I execute perfectly, that it puts me at the top of the podium, but I have very little control over that.
I love that way that you look at it, because you've talked in other interviews about how, you kind of fixed the things you knew that were going wrong. You looked and said, okay, I need to work on that. I need to fix that. And it might be the difference between 10 seconds. It might be an extra rep, but it might be the thing that puts you higher up and get enough points on that one to win overall. And when you went from second to first, and then you had your unbreaking chain, is that how you approached it? You broke down your training week into strength, weakness. That's how I'm going to tackle. I'm going to build the base here in my strength, then go from there. How would you do this in terms of it? Was there a normal week?
The format of how I would train was basically repetitive. I could take the stencil from, the 2016 and broad strokes. It was the same thing on repeat. A 10-month training block was the same from season to season. Obviously we have to account for, different formats, different qualifying times, that type of stuff. But, it was the same year in, year out. But every year after every competition, I would sit down, I would watch all the footage. I would look at the leaderboard, looking at what I did well, what I did poorly. And then also looking at like, okay, if I did poorly in it, what are my expectations moving forward? So like the 1 year deadlifting, I think I took like 27th place or something like that, like lower half. And then looking at, okay, how much time and effort am I willing to dedicate towards this? And if I'm trying to add 20 pounds by next season onto my deadlift, how much time is that taken away? Like, what am I sacrificing on the other side of, like, all these first places? If bumping my score on the deadlift is from 27th to 25th, but it's going to cause all my first places to drop to thirds, well, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah.
So looking at it of like pros and cons, I go into every day of training, I looked at it as if, trying to think of like the example, like, do you know like the Sega Genesis, like Street Fighter type game where it's just two characters And up in the top right corner of each one, there's your like health bar of how many points, you've had. I looked at my day as having that little bar up in the corner. I looked at every day as I have 100 points to spend today. How am I going to spend them?
Oh, like the experience points kind of thing.
Like, and just like daily effort, like never once did I run out of time in the day. I ran out of energy. And so I looked at it like I had 100 points of energy. How am I going to spread these out throughout the day? And so, if putting a deadlift session in that's going to take all 100 points and then everything else goes to shit, well, it's probably not worth it. But then, trying to accumulate some of those points even outside of the gym, so make sure that I'm in a relationship that doesn't affect me negatively at all. Like I'm blessed to have Sammy, and she's just always building me up. She's always there for support. But in terms of nutrition, if I'm tracking every single macro, how much effort and time is that going to take versus, if I just eat what I need to eat and I'm not tracking it to make sure that I'm as ripped as possible, anything like that, is that giving me an extra 5 points in the day? Simple examples. 99% of my pictures from when I was training while I was competing, I'm in the exact same outfit. I found a pair of pants I like. I found a t-shirt that I like, and I bought 10 of each. Like my tube socks. I only owned one type of tube sock. I only trained in one style of shoe so that every morning when I'm getting dressed to go to the gym, I'm not having to give 5 seconds of effort to what am I going to wear today. It's the same fucking thing every single day. Like I had a shaved head my entire CrossFit career, or once I started winning, because when I got up in the morning, I didn't want to have to worry about, I have bed hair. I need to like put time and effort. I don't need to schedule a haircut once every other week and go, commute somewhere, sit there for an hour. If the barber's running behind schedule, now I just cut into another hour. So setting all these things up, pretending that I only had 100 points to spend and conserving those things only onto the actions that are going to get me towards my goal.
I mean, that alone, that like what about there would have probably transformed people's lives. I think we're just sort of touching the surface. I mean, I've got questions on recovery, diet, nutrition. I'd love to have you on again and do a round 2, really go into things. But
Absolutely.
What do you think, if you had to give a bit of advice, because I know we're very short time, but what advice would you give to somebody listening to take the HWPO approach to life, to take the mechanical, the analytical approach, to realize that they're in their comfort zone, they can do more, they can push themselves?
So, I think it depends where are you in the journey and like what are your goals, so let's just keep it simple and say it's a fitness journey. Somebody is looking to start working out and they you just have an extra 50 pounds on you that you're like, I've had it, I'm getting rid of this. Baby steps. If you're in the very beginning stages of it, baby steps. First day in the gym, don't go out and drop $1,000 on a new wardrobe, $1,000 on supplements, all, and like gym membership. And you're like, I'm doing 2 a day, 6 days a week, all the baby steps. Because if you make this huge life altering decision, it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. It's going to be, miserable. You're out of your comfort zone so drastically that at the first road bump, you're going to immediately revert back. You're looking for an excuse to go back to your old habits. It's one of those things like diet. Somebody can be on a super, super strict diet, and the first time they go to a wedding and, it's catered and they're like, oh, I don't have my own food. This isn't the best food. Well, screw it. It's Friday. I'm just going to blow it out. And then I'm going to have dessert. And then Saturday, Sunday roll around and you're like, well, I already screwed up on Friday's diet. Might as well get my money's worth Saturday, Sunday. And then you're just derailed. Little changes. So like if you drink a 6-pack of soda a day, it's like, don't just go cold turkey and, have like withdrawals from it and be miserable because you're not having your 6-pack of whatever. It's like, cut it down to 3. And then once 3 becomes normal, then cut it down to 1. And then when 1 becomes normal, now it's a once a week type thing. My buddy that started coming here to work out, he first day of training, I think we did like a 16-minute EMOM. It may have even been a 12-minute EMOM. And then I was like, okay, go home. And he's like, what? That's it? I'm like, yeah. Like let's do a 16-minute EMOM for a week or 2 weeks until it becomes normal. We don't want that association to be daunting of like, oh shit, I need to go to the gym. It's going to be 3 hours. I'm going to be in pain the whole time. Like this is going to be miserable. So you're almost looking for an excuse to stop. But little changes, like just like I've had it where I was coming back into training after a month off season, and my first 3 days back, I just went to the gym. I didn't even train. I literally just went there. I was like, all right, you have to stay there for 30 minutes, just get back in the routine of the commute there, get back in the routine of hanging out with your buddies, all this type of stuff. Then the next week, it was like, all right, just bench press and curls and pull-ups, very keep my heart rate low. I'm just getting back into the gym, getting back into the habit of getting the bar out of the rack, loading the bar, having some tough sets. Very, very simple leading back in. And this is like after 10 years of Olympic weightlifting, 10 years of competitive CrossFit. It was just super, super basic, easy shit. So, baby steps. And once that baby step becomes the new norm, then add on a little bit extra.
And do you have a kind of like a mental approach, like a mantra or like a boss switch that you put on when you're going to compete? Where does the intensity come from? Or do you just enjoy yourself that match and fall back on the training? How do you mentally go into the competitions and things like that?
So for me, it was definitely a unique situation. The motivators that I use probably don't apply to most people. So I think, and that's another important part is that find your motivation, find your carrot at the end of the stick. For me, it was like, I didn't care what my social life looked like. I didn't care what my body looked like. I didn't care fucking anything. My singular goal was to win the games. And that was for a very unique situation. Early on, I made the decision to structure all my contracts so that they were heavily, heavily weighted on the CrossFit games. So for me, it was looking at it of like, okay, I don't care how unhappy I am, miserable I am, how much it hurts, nothing. Like that's all opinion. I'm here to win because I knew what was on the line. And I knew like, all right, this is going to have an effect on me for the rest of my life. What story do I want to tell? What future do I want to provide for myself and my family? And for me, it was, I wanted, like once you have a championship, nobody takes it away from you. Like somebody can beat all my records. Somebody can, win 6 in a row or win by more points or whatever it is. But forever and always, I'll be the 5-time world champion. So I wanted to make sure that, once I had those gold medals, I had them forever. But then, I wanted to live the rest of my life as a champion. There's that Muhammad Ali quote of like, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. And I took that to heart. So I think the big thing is identifying what is your goal. Is it to look better? Is it to, be consistent? Is it to create new habits? Is it to win? Is it to become dominant? But then you also have to weigh the pros and cons of like, all right, well, what am I sacrificing? For me to put in the effort that I wanted to put in, I had no social life. I was very lucky that I found Sammy and she was along for the ride. But, it was a very, very selfish couple of years that, I wasn't traveling for family function. I wasn't traveling for vacations. So most of the time that means that she's not traveling either. So, for me, I had my goals very clearly defined early on. And then I didn't waver on the effort that I was applying to those at all.
I mean, before we can get around to and then go into like the business side and stuff like that, but what would you, if it's a perfect time to sell HWPO because it's an amazing platform with some amazing programs, what would somebody listening get from it if they signed up to it just now? What would the athlete who wants to Fraser the games, who wants to be the new Matt, what can we get from it from signing up, the benefits, and what would you want the evolution to be?
Um, so I mean, with the app itself, HWPO training, we've expanded a ton over the last couple months. That first year was, kind of dipping my toes in and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. What do people want? What is there a market for? I put out my what I thought was the best training plan, and that it was intended for the person that isn't looking to compete at the games, but still, like, you're in the gym 6 days a week and you're chasing PRs. So you want to lift more weight, you want to row faster, run faster, all that stuff. And then listening to the feedback, according to some of the population, they're like, this is way too much volume. It was set up to be about 2 hours a day. And some people, this is way too much volume. And then you talk to some other people and like, this is such light volume. Where's the rest of it? And so we listened to that feedback, and we created two more tracks. So we made the pro track that is 2 sessions per day, probably 2.5 hours per session. And then we made the 60-minute track where you can be in the gym by yourself and be held accountable by all the different time domains, and you're in and out of the gym in 1 hour, start to finish. And then, we heard people like, hey, I have limited equipment, or I have no interest in lifting barbells, anything like that. So we made a sweat track where it's no barbells, no high skill gymnastics. There's no progressions that it follows throughout the season. It's just a 45-minute daily sweat and get healthy. So we're always expanding. We're always trying to provide the best service possible for the customers. But I think the big thing that I take a lot of pride in is it's not the instant gratification. It's not every day work up to a heavy single or run as fast as you can, pull as hard as you can on the rower. There's very, very little of that. And anytime there's a 1 rep max, there's usually, at least 10 to 12 weeks of progressions leading up to that point. So especially with the HWPO flagship track, I put a ton of emphasis on pulling the skill level down and working on the foundation so that moving forward, you have a better foundation. So something as simple as pull-ups. When you compete in CrossFit, it's almost mandatory that you have to do kipping pull-ups or butterfly pull-ups to speed up your cycle rate. But I always saw that how many people became dependent on that kip. And so instead of the kit being there for assistance and making it easier, it was a requirement. They couldn't complete the rep without it. So I want to provide a great foundation. So it's not just lifting heavy. We're doing higher volume, lighter weight, and then tapering up to a 1 rep max. The same thing with the gymnastics work. We're constantly doing accessory work and strict movements, scaled movements to build the proper foundation so that moving forward, you have that strength there, and so then you can keep building off of it.
I love it. I love how it's that analytical. It's the mechanical part of your brain again. It's okay. Taking a business, I'm looking for feedback. How do I improve the lever? How do I make the system better? Like everything you're doing, and it's such an amazing legacy. And I think we could talk for hours. I think we're just getting into the nitty gritty.
This is the iceberg, man.
I would love. I mean, I'm honored to have you on, and I'd love to have you on again. But for people, how do we keep in touch? How do we see these amazing things you're doing, and how do we follow along in this amazing journey that you've got going on?
So, the spot that me personally that I'm most active is on Instagram. Instagram handles Matthew Fraz, Matthew with 1T. But then for everything HWPO, there's hwpotraining.com, and then you can download the app for HWPO training. So you need to sign up online and then download the app, and then there's tracks for basically every fitness level, and then we're constantly expanding. We're always working. Our next endeavor is like very sport specific things. So not just the general health and fitness well-rounded. It's for people that they have a desire to get better at this one modality. We want to be that one-stop shop when it comes to fitness and working out and getting better. And, with the HWPO app, there's so much more. We have like a community group center where there's daily videos, there's live calls, we have full-time people that are in there answering questions, so that no matter what track you're on, what question you have, even if it's someone else has asked it 100 times already, you can ask the question and get a personalized response for it. But yeah, I'd say that's between the HWPO training and my personal Instagram. That's where I'm going to be most active.
And the feed in the Fraser looks, the food in there was amazing.
Always. Yeah. If you want to tag along with Sammy, she just released her first cookbook a couple months ago. She has her Instagram handle, Feeding the Frasers. And, I was so lucky. It was like having a cheat code on deck of just her cooking for me all the time. And that's what it started as, was, just a digital menu for myself. So when I'm leaving for training and she's like, hey, what do you want for dinner? I can pull up her Instagram page and just kind of scroll through and be like, let's do this. And then, so many people that are striving to be fitter and better want to bring in every aspect, and diet is a huge aspect of it. So they wanted to see what I was doing. And then it just got so popular. She turned that into a full-time career.
Well, that's it for another week. And thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.